Welcome and good morning to another episode of the TM1 Breakfast Show. My name's John, I'm your host, and with me today I've got Andrea. Hello.
Hi, John.
Hello. Good to have you here, and she's all the way from LA. Now, today we have her on our shows because she's a special guest to talk about merchandise planning. Now, Andrea has been working all of her life, pretty much, on merchandise planning, so she knows what she's talking about, and she's doing it for over a decade. She's worked in companies such as Saks Fifth Avenue, and she's been around as VP of Merc Planning. She knows her stuff. Now, it's important for me to get some expert opinion on here because I love TM1. I know TM1, and I'm sure you do too. But for some of you who's watching, you may be in the same boat as me, which is we love to do more with Merc Planning, but we don't have enough information. So today is going to be a session about that topic. Now, before we get into it, let's talk about Merc Planning as a whole. So first of all, thanks for joining us today, Andrea. I know you're joining us all the way from LA, and it's great that we have this technology now that we can still talk and share information, even though, yeah, it's lockdown, COVID, and all that. But hopefully the community can still get something out of it. Well, let's talk about Merc Planning. Why is Merc Planning a thing? What do you think, Andrea?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, this past year, we all saw a lot of things that we weren't used to seeing. So at least in LA here in the States, a lot of empty shelves in grocery stores. Going to buy something on Amazon was taking sometimes 4 to 6 weeks, where it was usually 2 days. And that's something that we started to, we kind of rolled with the times and started to accept that a little bit. But the thing is, if you think about it, things have started to go back to slightly normal in some places, and supply chains are kind of figuring their things out. But as customers, we kind of forget quickly, and we want what we want now. So if you think about it, it is customer focus and the success of your business. So if you're constantly out of a product, you're going to lose that customer. People, like I said, people want what they want. They don't want to wait. And on the flip side, if you start losing your customer base, you're not going to have a business. So those are two important things, because most of the things that are in stores, they are purchased 6 to 9 months in advance. And that's kind of why we saw some of what we did. And we're still seeing some of that stuff. I know there was a shortage on computer chips. I know there's stuff kind of in the auto industry that's still, these companies that also rely on other places to bring goods in to make their complete package. It's been crazy, but like I said, we're shortly people are going to forget and be like, hey, why is this not here? I want what I want right now.
I can totally relate to that because last month I was trying to build I was trying to buy a piece of tech, and I had to go through 3 shops because it was all out of stock.
Yeah, and that's frustrating. But where does that problem stem from? Was the planner at the store, were they in the wrong? Was the manufacturer having issues? I had the same issue with a printer. Yes, I was looking for a specific brand, but it was out everywhere. I was on 5 different websites. It's like I said, these are things that, prior to 2020, every once in a while you'd find something you couldn't get, but you usually got it from somewhere.
That's a good point. So, I mean, when we can't buy something as a consumer, well, whose fault is it? Is it the supplier? Is it manufacturer? Is it the shop? Is it me? Am I buying the wrong thing? And for people who, I guess, are looking over this, right, having the right tool at the right time would help you solve a lot of these issues. There are things outside of our control, but with the right tool, we can make things better. And I think this is what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, John, I think that's a real great lead-in to kind of like what I'm here to talk about. So as John said, I've spent almost 15 years in merchandise planning. And the thing is, a lot of it was spent in Excel. And that was very frustrating. And I remember thinking, over the years, it's at the time, let's say it was 2015. I was like, we're in the 21st century. Why am I still in Excel, offline tools, trying to get double, triple checking numbers, making sure things make sense, pulling from 3 different systems, one financial, one non-financial, things didn't match. It was frustrating. Spent too much time in Excel, too many late nights. One time in particular, I remember market was starting the next week, and we were also a little short-staffed at the time, so this wasn't normal. But everything I was doing, I had a multi-vendor department. So I had all of these Excel tabs rolling up. And I was trying to figure out, kind of the plans based on historical data, what I would be recommending the buyer to buy. And I just remember sitting there thinking, it's 10 o'clock at night. I'm an entry-level employee, broke in New York. Why am I still working here? Like, why am I working this late at night till 10 p.m. in an Excel sheet? Because I was there so late because we didn't have the proper tools. And it was, like I said, very frustrating at times. Well, and a lot of that ended up changing for me when we actually met John in Hong Kong. So I had taken a job to move to Hong Kong to start a merchandise planning team. And prior to me getting there, a decision had been made to purchase the system called TM1. I'd never heard of it. I was told it was great. And started working with it though, and was like, you know what? If someone had told me this is what it did, I wouldn't have believed you. And I was wondering, how did I not have this in my job the past 8 years at the two companies I worked at? Because like I said, I was coming from Neiman Marcus was my first job, and Saks Fifth Avenue, both of their corporate headquarters. They're big companies in the US. They're two of the leading, or were at the time, the leading luxury brands. So they're known, they have name recognition. I wasn't working for a small, tiny mom and pop shop with systems that didn't make sense. These were, bigger companies. So when I started using TM1, I was like, this is Excel on steroids. If I would have had this at my previous jobs, like, it would have relieved so much pain. I mean, I even just think back to doing a company roll-up. We had 8 divisions. Under all the divisions had different buyers and departments. We were rolling up sales and gross margin. And at that time, this was an Excel spreadsheet. There was probably 40 or 50 different people touching this spreadsheet. And the fact that, between a shared spreadsheet, a corrupt file, people getting locked out, it was a mess. And this went up to our SVP of planning to see where a company was going to roll up for the next season's plans. Now that to me is just, it blows my mind. And even then it still did. So I just remember thinking, like, I cannot believe we're doing this in Excel. Granted, we had systems. We did. But like I said, clunky, inflexible, just everything was easier in Excel. So we kept using that.
Can I ask a question here? When we met, it was like 7-8 years ago now. I've kind of lost track of time. All right.
It was 2015.
And now we fast forward to now, right? Now is 2021. Yeah. Surely someone would think, big companies with a lot of resources, when I want to do Merc Plan, can't not have a good tool, right? People are spending millions and millions on this kind of on systems. Is this still a thing? Like, what is your view on that?
I don't. This is my opinion. I don't have the research behind it. I will tell you though, I think a lot of companies, they might invest in what they think is a great system, but you have a small group of people making these decisions. And what is it really? You might have a great ERP, but it doesn't mean it's great for the end user. Mm-hmm. And that to me is key. Mm-hmm. You need to be able to have your end users have the flexibility to run their business in the way that they want to. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these systems end up being kind of big and clunky. And I even remember our forecasting tool. The reason we did a lot of stuff in Excel, we would, kind of do our departments and vendors in Excel and then put it into the forecasting tool to have the company roll up for the forecasts. Because you would go enter the information, and every time you hit enter, it would spin for a second. You would have to hit calculate, and you'd wait for 15 seconds. We couldn't scenario plan. That's another example I can talk to too. Like, I had this very political brand. Mm-hmm. I'd just been promoted to a planner, so I was young and nervous and excited all at the same time. And there were these purchases that were made prior to me being in my position. It was $26 million US at the retail price. Mm-hmm. And there had been an agreement in place with this brand to get us to a margin guarantee, which is very typical. A lot of times people will pay, they might they pay for your markdowns essentially, mm-hmm. To help get you to a number that makes sense. But legally you pay for markdowns, and there's a few other caveats there. Or you can take back merchandise. So the agreement with this brand was to return the merchandise to the vendor to get to a gross margin rate. And how that works is if you return the goods before markdown, you're not incurring the markdown costs. So the thing is, when I got there, it was pretty early in the season, but business was so bad for this brand that the RTV projection was 13 million on the 26 million. Ooh. Now that is a big number for any brand to bring back. Like, I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if someone may have lost a job over this at that brand, because you don't make those kind of goods, ship them out, and expect to get them back. But sorry, now I'm rambling a little bit, because to the point is, I had to meet with this brand every week and tell them the updated need from the scenario that I did. Well, I would have loved to have been doing this in a system and do some scenario planning where things could be automated, and I could have just said, hey, let me take my last week's forecast, put that into the last timeline in a way. So what did they see last time? And kind of redo my forecast, which barely changed each week. But like I said, kind of doing the due diligence. This is a political brand. We need to meet with them weekly, show them the need, be a partner. I mean, I understand all that, but the time I spent in Excel copying all these lines down. Okay, this is what I showed them last week. Now I have to move it all down to the last timeline. Redo my forecast, make sure all the formulas are correct. It was just every week I could have been strategically trying to drive my business instead of working in Excel. So.
Great point that you touched on there, because one of the most common use of TM1 is doing these rolling forecasts, right? Having the ability to do what if scenarios on demand, on the fly, and be able to change structures and report on those and report on the KPI. That's key. And that's kind of common for people who used to TM1, right? Or planning analytics with Watson. That's cool these days.
Yes.
So I guess essentially what you're saying is that it was so, I mean, it's crucial, right? It's a real business problem with a lot of stake. I mean, we're talking about 50% based on numbers that you've just mentioned.
I mean, that was a unique case, but
yeah.
It kind of just went back to, like, it was bad business, but also the amount of work I had to do to kind of prove that in working enough on Excel, where a lot of systems, though, like TM1 being one of them, or planning analytics with Watson, you can do scenario planning. You have the flexibility, and that removes the error. And like, I'm also someone that's been in meetings, working on these Excel spreadsheets, and double and triple checking them prior to the meetings, because I've seen people go in with one number wrong and someone catches something and the whole meeting gets derailed. Because once someone sees something's not right, well, that number's not right. Is anything right here? What am I looking at? I can't bring this, to a brand. Or so you just having the correct system that allows you to do these things and do the calculations versus your Excel formulas. It's it's so important, because it kind of goes back to what I said in the beginning. Making sure you have the product, the right product, the right place, the right time to satisfy the customer needs, essentially.
And so based on what you've described, I mean, it would make so much sense if you had that in TM1, because the key thing in TM1 is, for people who are not using this in the way that we're describing now, something to look forward to, all the business rules are in the system, in the cube, and everyone's looking at the same version of the truth. Now, this is different to some other tools that say, I hear it a lot, there's one version of truth. But in some other systems, when you say one version of truth, it's still 4 different tables inside one application. So you could be looking at duplicates in a different version of that number. But in TM1 is literally one cell. So if I want to find brand A at shop A for 1st of July 2021, it is one number, right? So that would alleviate some of these pain points of double, triple checking. Well, I mean, you should still check your numbers, of course.
Yes, definitely always check your work. But I mean, that's the thing, is I kind of said we had 3 systems at one of my companies, financial, non-financial, depending on what time of the day you pulled something, it might not match. It'd update Wednesday night, which was random, or something like that. I remember they had a weird update time. So you come in Monday and do your reports and pull everything into your offline saved templates. You'd have that view saved, dump it into Excel to make it look pretty, so you could actually show that to someone else. So it was, yes, I mean, that is key too, because I remember being in meetings, so it's like, oh, well, that came from that system, that's why that's off a little bit. Like, that doesn't seem professional.
It doesn't sound right.
Like, especially when you work with numbers for a living, it's, Yeah, it's a little hard to wrap your mind around.
So here's a spot question for you. So I'm in Australia, so I work with a lot of local customers here. But in the States, where people are doing so much online, I buy a lot of stuff from the States as well. From what you can see in the marketplace, is still a real thing right now. Like people are still struggling with reporting in Excel, and dumping all the data on the Excel and then piece together the report that looks nice. But behind the scenes, there's heaps of work.
Yeah, and I think it's case by case. I do know I have a friend that works at a startup, and she has been saying like what they kind of do is they get data from companies and do some cool stuff with it. But it's hard. She's been saying it's really hard to just get their data because it's such a mess, because they have numerous systems. And that's why she's also familiar with TM1, and she's like, TM1 is, we both think it's kind of amazing, which I don't want to sound too like...
Yeah, not too salesy.
But the thing is, I became a believer, and when I used it, I was using the kind of the Excel version. So it was but for someone who came from loving Excel, I really enjoyed that because it was Excel on steroids, that read-write capability, the ability to roll up. It made things so much simpler. But yeah, so I do think it is case by case. So because I do think there are some companies that kind of have best in class, that they are doing things properly. I just don't think it's the norm. And when you think about investing in a system and making these changes, they're not easy decisions, and they cost money and they cost time. And the people that implement them are business users that already have their hands full. Probably like looking at Excel all day long. But they have their hands full with their day-to-day job. So to kind of take on that extra task and then going through the sprint part, it's just not and people don't do this on a regular basis. So it ends up being, after they get through it, it's like, I wish I would have known what I did when this started, kind of that whole game, I guess, or scenario.
Yeah, story of our lives.
Okay, so I guess another example I can kind of give you is when the hierarchy moves in a company, or you have a department switch. So that sounds so simple, but it's really not. And the reason this is so important is when you plan, you use your history. So yeah, at the total company, your history is your history. It's all in the ERP, so it exists. But if it's not in the right classification that you need, it's a disaster. So kind of a way to describe this, let me share my screen briefly. Maybe this will help. All right. So, for example, the first year, we have Department 422, which is all grapes, Department 568, all apples. The next year, we did some department moves, but look at this. So yes, the history does exist, but it's not in the right place. So if I'm trying to plan Department 422, I'm not looking at what was I'm looking at what was in Department 422 last year, but not actually the physical merchandise in comparison to what it is this year. You really need to be looking at the correct inventory, the correct merchandise that was in its spot this year and last year.
And that concept would apply to reporting, like having comm stores, right, or new startup stores, because it's moving. And you need to track the same KPIs, but of course, it's not comparing apples to apples.
Correct. And Comp Store, that I'm actually really happy you brought that up. Comp Store, that was also always a pain. We tracked the closing stores and new stores. Comp Store was an offline calculation for us. Also, not fun to do. These things that should be so simple, you need to be able to track them in a system that is flexible and makes sense. Not just, putting it in a line in Excel. Like that was, yeah. Once again, back to memories of not fun planning, because we had these, systems that were like kind of all over the place, which is why we referred to Excel. And someone actually asked me recently, why Excel? Why do so many, finance and planners like Excel? And I was like, it's the one tool that's common across all of the places we've worked, and it's the best tool, which is really sad if you think about it. Like, yes, Excel is amazing, don't get me wrong, but not for some of the things that we're talking about doing.
Yeah, great point, and I think I can relate to that. I mean, a lot of people I speak to, they end up using Excel for, I mean, various things, merch planning, uh, finance type of operations, is because their underlying system isn't able to meet 100% of their needs. So, typically it's about 85 to 90%. Where do they
Yeah,
get the
well,
last mile, right?
no, and that's the thing I'll say too is TM1 is very flexible, and especially if you have the correct user interface, that to me is key. The flexibility and thinking about the experience of the end user.
So, thinking about user interface, what are you talking about here?
Well, one that I actually was recently introduced to is Applica.
Right. Okay.
So this was built as an application for TM1, and it's beautiful. It's visually stimulating, but the thing I like the most about it is its flexibility. So you're able to plan your business the way you want to, not how someone thinks you should. And that's been kind of my experience with lots of like more ERP systems, and they'll be like, "Oh, here's our out of the box solution," and then to do any modifications, it's like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, okay, it ends up being this big deal."
Right.
At least from my experience, because I was doing an implementation in the past year, and it was a little rough.
That's a
But
gentle way for things. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but I mean that's the thing is I'm a big fan of the flexibility of Applica, like very
Right.
much. And if I would have had this tool back in some of my jobs before, I maybe would still be in merchandise planning.
So I'm glad you didn't have
Maybe.
that before, because now you have the TM1 crew now.
No, and that being said, I'm obviously very happy to be.
So okay. So to talk about that for the people who don't know Applica, I think you're referring to Applica UX. So Applica UX is this amazing front end that is very 2021. You can use it on tablets and PCs and mobile devices, and the benefit of that is it keeps all the goodness of the TM1 engine, which is this super flexible structure, and allows you to do time sensitive analysis. Exactly the case that you did on the PowerPoint before, on the animation before. But it adds that layer of usability on top, so you're kind of combining the best of both worlds. That's for the people who don't understand.
And like I said, I mean, you don't want a system that you're kind of being forced to use, which many of us have been. That you're like, well, I'm doing it this way because I have to. And
Yeah.
the cool thing about Applica is it can be, it's a framework.
Yes.
It can be designed to your needs, and that's what I even kind of like. Because even when I look at some of the stuff in there, through what I've been able to explore, I'm like, oh well, this is good, but I would do this, But that's what you kind of get to do with it, which is what makes it so great.
Now, with all of that said, based on your experience, what's the latest and greatest and what people should look out for in the domain of Merc planning? Of course, in relation to TM1.
Well, what I'm pretty excited about is the launch of Supply Focus, which is within CubeWise. It was on June 2nd was the official launch. It was done by mainly a team in Europe, and I'm super impressed with what they did, and super excited to be part of their team as we kind of continue this journey. That sounds so cheesy when I say it, but it is whole. The thing is, CubeWise has been doing these types of applications for customers in the past, but now this is kind of like taking that next step forward and saying, hey, here's actually a framework that we have in all these different modules. So I also feel like it's a super exciting time for me to be joining CubeWise and be able to help with this, with my experience in merchandise planning. So that is something I think to definitely look out for. The frameworks are beautiful. Like I said, the user flexibility, it's pretty awesome, and it's using the newest technologies between automation and decision optimization, which is also pretty cool. And coming from someone who was a little bit of I had a bad experience with, what do we call it? AI, I guess. we were kind of forced to use a tool. This is a while ago, and it wasn't great. But kind of seeing some of the algorithms and things that we can do with supply focus, I've become a convert. So I do think, obviously technology is always changing, and it's pretty cool some of the things that we get to now use and see and do.
I mean, that's a good point and ties back to what you were saying before as well, because just having a tool doesn't mean it's going to help. It has to be the right tool at the right time, and you've got to apply it the right way. And I guess what you're saying is supply focus is the embodiment of all of that, right?
I mean, I think it is. Like, I would love to have this at any of my jobs, because it is that front end and that flexibility to be able to, like, slice and dice. And like I said, run your business the way you want to, not the way someone else thinks you should. And that's where, though, you work with the kind of experts and, they help you with that back end and make sure it's a good implementation too. You don't want to rush something like that and just say like, oh, it's good enough. Like, no, because then that application, it has to be built on a good core, which, I mean, yes. I even told you, I liked the older versions of planning analytics that I used too. So, it was that core engine that I liked so much, and that the ability to still analyze the business in a very easy way.
I love this idea, taking what's already great to the next level, right? Where Richard went last week. So, if for the people who are interested in supply focus, where would you recommend them to go and to look for to get more info on this?
So you can go on Google and Google Supply Focus. There is a website, and they're also on LinkedIn, Supply Focus. And
that's the normal spelling, Supply Focus?
Yep. SUPPLY.
Okay.
FOCUS. I'm a terrible speller.
Thanks for that. Yeah, even now for me, I'll be able to Google it. That's great. Okay, well, I've taken a lot of your time today. I know we have a time zone difference, so thanks for staying up. So thank you so much for your time. And for people who are interested in this topic more, right, not supply focus in general, are they able to contact you directly? What's the best way to go?
Sure. Email.
All right. Okay. Well, email Andrea or drop me a line or just email to the TM1 Breakfast Show. We'll show you in the links below. And look, this content, it's all for you guys. Hopefully you found it useful today. And if you do, and then you have any suggestions, put in some comments and communicate with us. We'll do our best to attend to your questions and needs. All right. And with that, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, John. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
That was fun. Yeah. All right. We'll see you guys next time.